African cinema, as opposed to other parts of the world, had its inception tied to the continent's period of colonialism. Motion picture projection was mainly used by the colonial powers as a tool of instilling Western values disguised as educational projects. These projects would span through the British, French, and Belgian colonial territories, having only Europeans giving directions for how and what would be shot. The commercial growth of many major African cities also saw the proliferation of urbanization and many other forms of Western entertainment. Soon enough, movie theaters, or what was then referred to as the bioscope, grew numerously in these main urban districts. And since these movie houses were becoming quite popular, the colonial administration would loosen some of its control and allow private owners to run these venues, with the main goal being that of facilitating the colony's economic growth. With the growth of the bioscope came the demand for foreign films, particularly Hollywood films that many found fascinating, entertaining, but more so escapist. So at this point, the style of filmmaking changed from the colonial educational films to more of this kind. Films that were produced in Hollywood were deemed too liberal and open-minded by the powers that be, fearing that these American films would negatively influence the natives' perspective on the power structures of the time. A new slate of films and subject matters would be proposed. These films would include some form of native life, but they would be directed by Europeans and would be centered on the benevolence and leadership of Western culture and white people. A classic example of this type of movie would be Zoltan Korda's Sanders of the River. These films came to be known as colonial burden films, since they really weren't about Africa but merely something about it, given that no African had creative control over them. But what these colonial burden films did do, which came to the Africans' benefit, is that it gave them proximity to the filmmaking process and all its technical requirements. Many Africans who were on set as actors, extras, sound and camera operators would soon learn the tools of the trade. It was an opening door of some sort, and some of them would eventually go on to study film in such prestigious places as the Sorbonne, with figures such as Pauline Vieira or Maruganda, Safi Faye being the leading proponents. African writers were also eager to break into filmmaking at this time, particularly Ousmane Sembène, who struggled to get sponsorship from the French, but would later on succeed in securing support from the Soviets. It was really in the late 1950s and early 60s that Africans began to take the helm and gain more control of the filmmaking process. African independence and a growing sense of national identity paved the way for many to begin telling stories of their own without the constraints of Western preferences. But with independence also came the challenges of corrupt neo-colonial African regimes. The African landscape, which most of these filmmakers adopted, was like a shattered glass with bits and pieces of African history scattered all about. The first filmmakers attempted to piece these broken pieces together by weaving these experiences and the burden of modern African life through the power of moving images.